Welcome to the future of real estate. Your chance to find out what's going on in real estate and the real estate market. This morning's show is brought to you by the Ellis Team at RE/MAX Realty Group. RE/MAX's award winner for most transactions in Florida.
With the Ellis Team at RE/MAX, it's a family affair. Always call the Ellis Team, they'll handle you with care.
Welcome back to the future of real estate. I'm Brett Ellis of the Ellis Team at RE/MAX Realty Group. With us today, special guest Ken Wilkinson, and we're going to ask him some pointed questions. We hope to not get him too upset, but one of the things that comes to mind is it goes back to the working waterfront issue.
Right.
And you actually ought to know a little bit about it because you sat on the Tax Budget Reform Committee.
I did.
That meets once every 20 years. We've had, matter of fact, last time we were on the show, I think we went in depth about that. So you know what the language was supposed to be.
Sure.
But is that what's really... Tell people about the procedure, how it works.
It's frustrating, and I hope I can break it down to where it's easy to understand, because these issues are not always easy to understand. However you get an issue on the ballot, it's the voters that change the Constitution. You're really restricted as to ballot, title, and summary, X amount of words. I think it's 175. But that's what the voter reads when they go to vote. Fine. So once you change the Constitution, then you're required, the legislature is required to write implementing language in a subsequent session. So last year it was killed because nobody could come to a meeting of the minds between the House and the Senate as to how to implement what we wrote. I mean, I'm the author of Working Waterfront, as I was Save Our Homes. And this is what's frustrating to me. I know what our intent was. And we went through 14 months of study, traveled this state, had over 131 public meetings with the public, and wrote all this stuff. So yes, we changed the Constitution. I know what the intent was. Now in the legislature, the last 2 weeks, the Senate, F&T, and some other committees are writing the implementing language. They have totally, it's my opinion, thrown out essentially what we did, what the voters voted on, because it was very narrow for a reason. Now they broadened it, in my opinion, for special interests, constituent issues, etc. But that was not what the voters voted on. I think it's unconstitutional.
More people are getting the exemption, the working waterfront exemption.
That was intended. That was intended. If they want to include these other type businesses, that's fine. Write another constitutional amendment, get it on the ballot, let the citizens read it, pass
What
it.
it was supposed to be was like marinas or places where you could only have your business on the water. You couldn't move it somewhere else.
We had a problem in Florida. We recognized it. The appraisers in Florida recognized it by using what's called highest and best use on waterfront to value properties. That was just as if it were condo development. Yes, that's what that property was worth. But we got a law, a constitutional change, so that we can't use that methodology. We have to use actual use. It's a very good, positive thing. We were losing our waterfront. Now they want to include businesses that could have that business elsewhere. It doesn't have to be on the waterfront. It's wrong, and I'm a little upset about it. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. I'm making some phone calls, and I'll be in Tallahassee to testify to that effect. There's another one, by the way, Brett, that as well I had a lot of input in. You see, when it becomes personal, and you get, because the time and effort you put into something, you believe in it.
Plus, you also know the intent.
The intent, totally. But in this issue, in Florida, because we changed the Constitution, that if a single-family resident wants to improve, we call it hurricane hardening. If they have storm windows now that you actually don't need a shutter on the outside of those because they will withstand any storm we've ever had before. But they're expensive. That if you go to that expense, the property appraisers in Florida cannot use that to raise your value. That value, that cost will not be added in for tax purposes. That's a very good thing. Very narrow, very specific.
It was called retrofitting, wasn't it?
Yes, that was the language in what the people voted on. Well, you cannot retrofit new construction.
But it doesn't exist yet.
As we know in politics, now that it's in the legislature to write the implementing language on this constitutional amendment, building association, different people who have a special interest, and I understand they have a special interest. But now what they've convinced some leaders in the legislature is they're going to add this so that we have to recognize that in new construction. Yes, that may be a good thing, but that's not what was voted on, and that's not what was written. And it's frustrating when you run into these things because it gets out of my control, We know what we did, and now they're going to pass legislation that requires these changes that nobody voted on.
You know, there ought to be a process where, one, that could be, in my opinion, could be unconstitutional.
I'm convinced in my mind, I'm not an attorney, but I'll be contacting some. I'd like to find one, if you're listening, who is willing to pro bono, because I can't take it out of my pocket, that, shoot, I'd be willing to be involved in that.
But
just stop that, kill that legislation is what I try to do.
But you still got to go back to the original thing what the people voted on. You don't kill the whole thing. You just just take out.
With working waterfront, I've been advised, because I some people who are more knowledgeable in this area, and I've been talking to them. My understanding now is we don't have to have the implementing language on working waterfront. It could self-do. It would be up to then the property appraiser to interpret it. And I know how I would do it. It'd be extremely conservative, I can tell you that. But you know, it's the frustration of having to you know, I've been doing this almost 30 years. And when you see this happen, and you see what happens in Washington, well, it happens in Tallahassee too. The closer you are to your government, the better off we are.
Absolutely. Well, I think the voters are sending a message loud and clear nationwide.
I've been watching that. It's very interesting.
They're watching. And you know, maybe we needed all this because I think for a lot of years there was apathy and people just weren't watching.
Yeah.
And I think they are now. It takes a good recession. It takes a good housing downturn. It takes a lot of things for people to stand up and pay attention. But I think they're doing it now.
Yeah, the downturn in the market, which is what our job is. We report and we record and report values. But the public has opened their eyes a little bit more in this trim process, truth and millage, because now the taxing authorities were not able to sit back, leave the millage the same, and tell the public they didn't raise taxes because they didn't raise the millage, which is that biggest lie. I've always called that for years. Now they're going to pay more attention to the budgets, aren't they? So sometimes there's a silver lining in different things that happen in society.
Well, you know, we had a presidential candidate run on transparency and accountability, and yet
I haven't seen much of that.
Nobody has, and that's why it caused people to pay attention. And you know, that may filter down to all levels. People are paying attention. City of Cape Coral, Lee County, at the state of Florida, every state in the nation, and of course in Congress and the president. So
I'm feeling better the last 6 months about overall that there's more involvement in government, and people are holding people accountable, and that's a good thing.
You get the government you pay attention to. You got to pay attention and be involved. So, well, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. Enlightening as always. When do you get your numbers that are more concrete?
That I have confidence in as being what it's going to be. You know, every day we're more into the analytical part of it, which is taking the sales and making sure the arm's length transactions. And then we get all that work done when all of them are recorded. So we're still getting some being recorded from last year. That then we can start doing some sales to assessment ratios. We break it down by neighborhood, and that'll give us an idea of what we're going to have to do and where the final tax roll will end up. I think it's, again, I think it'll be a double-digit decrease overall, but I don't think it's going to be the 25% we had last year. That's about as close as I can get to prediction.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll have you back when we get some more better numbers, and we'll kind of compare and contrast and see what it looks like.
I appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you. You've been watching The Future of Real Estate. Stay tuned next week, and look forward to seeing you.